All right, on the back, we're doing the same exact thing. We have a different function rule to start with for f of x. This time, there's more than one transformation that's happening, okay? So that might make it a little bit more challenging than the ones we've had. So what are we doing here? Good. Reflecting over the x-axis because the negative's on the outside, and we're translating up 1. Okay? So to write g of x, we're going to have negative f of x plus 1. So I'm going to put g of x here equals, I'm going to rewrite this, negative f of x plus 1. Well, this is f of x. So that is going to plug into that spot that's right here. So we're going to have negative parenthesis. Well, what is that? Negative what? What number? Negative 1. So I'm going to put a negative 1 there. It's the same thing. And then in the parentheses, I'm going to put what f of x is, which is 1/2 x plus 1. And then we can't forget about this plus 1 on the outside. So the first thing we have to do is distribute. What happens when you distribute that negative 1? What's negative 1 times 1/2? Negative 1/2. So that'd be x. And what's negative 1 times 1? Negative 1. And then we have to bring down our plus 1. What happens to these? They go to 0. They cancel out. So our equation's negative 1/2 x. Okay. All right, so we're going to graph the first one. So where do I start when I graph this? At positive 1. My slope is 1/2, rise over run. So we're going to go up 1/2, up 1/2, up 1/2. Okay, you just need a few points, and it might help, if you want to get a ruler, get a ruler. We're going to make our f of x a solid line, and then our translated line, or transform line, we're going to make dotted or dashed. Okay? All right, where does this graph start at? What's our y-intercept here? It's it's 0. Because remember, that became 0. We just didn't write it. So this starts at 0. And this time, our slope is negative 1/2. So we're going to go down 1, forward 2. Down 1, forward 2. Because remember, our slope's negative, so our line should be going down. Or we could go up and backwards 2. Up 1 and backwards 2. But our line is negative, so it should be decreasing. So we're going to line that up, and then we're just going to make a dashed line. All right, let's look at B. B says to take f of x and vertically stretch it by 4 and then reflect it across the y-axis. So how are we going to write that rule? What does it mean to vertically stretch f of x? Put the 4 in front of the f of x. And then what does it mean to reflect across the y-axis? Change that x to there's a negative on the inside. Okay? Now this is probably the most complicated one that you've seen so far. There's something happening on the inside and on the outside. Okay? So to write this, we're going to put our 4 on the outside, and then we're going to write our f of x. But this time, where x is, it's not x anymore, it's negative x. In order of operations, say to do what's inside the parentheses first before we multiply. Well, what's 1/2 times negative x? Negative 1/2 x. So this is going to be 4 times negative 1/2 x plus 1. And then we just distribute that. So what's 4 times negative 1/2? What's half of 4? And that would be negative 2, so negative 2x, and then 4 times 1 is 4. Okay? So there's our transformed equation. So we're going to graph the first one. So the first one, remember we started at 1 and we went up 1 over 2. So that's our original one. And then how do I graph this one? I start at positive 4. I go down 2 over 1, because this has a 1 under it. Down 2 over 1. Or I could go up 2 and backwards 1. Either way, we get the same line. And our line should be going down because it's negative. And we're going to make that one dashed.